Hello landscape lovers! Let me be blunt. Landscape photography today is full of myths and lies. And I'm not talking theory. I see it every single day, every single week, on forums, in Facebook groups, and even when people join our expeditions in Iceland, Lofoten, Alaska, Cyprus. Photographers arrive with big dreams, but also with terrible advice they have picked up online. Advice that destroys their photos. And after years of shooting in some of the harshest conditions, from polar nights to desert heat, I know exactly which so-called truths are complete nonsense and what actually works when you are standing in the field. And that's why I made this video. Not because I like ranting, but because so many of you asked me to cut through the myths and lies and show the reality. And one quick note before we dive in. If you want to go deeper, our Patreon is where we share behind the scenes, field notes, and advanced workflow insights you will not see on YouTube. So let's get started with the fatal sins of landscape photography. The first one is classic. I don't edit my photos. I don't bracket exposures. I want to capture the scene exactly as I saw it. Sounds noble, right? But it's complete ignorance. Today's best full-frame cameras give you maybe 14 or 15 stops of dynamic range. But human vision, once your eyes adapt, handles close to 30 EV. And remember, every single stop is a doubling. So the gap between 15 EV and 30 EV isn't just 2 times, it's exponentially bigger. That's why when you point your camera into the sun, the highlights blow out, the shadows block up. You didn't capture the scene as you saw it. You captured what your sensor could handle. That's why we use bracketing. Not to make the photo fake, but to overcome the limits of the camera and get close to reality. And if you think this is cheating, go look up Ansel Adams. He manipulated tones heavily in the darkroom. We are just doing the same, but digitally. This ties directly into the whole discussion about filters. Graduated ND filters, whether soft or hard, simply don't make sense anymore. Unless you are shooting a perfectly flat seascape with a straight horizon, real landscapes are never straight. If you put a grad filter over mountains or trees, the tops turn unnatural dark, while the lower parts stay too bright. That's photographic prehistory. Exposure bracketing is the real solution. And we have already explained why, considering the dynamic range of our scenes. The funniest part is when the people stack several square grads and then add a tobacco grad on the sky. It's a pure landscape hell. And remember, every extra piece of glass in front of your lens reduces image quality, no matter how premium the filter claims to be. So only use filters when they actually make sense. So forget about UV protection filters, they are useless. The only filters that really belong in a modern landscape kit are solid ND filters, a polarizer when needed, and in some cases a dedicated night sky filters to reduce light pollution. Another classic mistake I keep seeing is when someone uses a polarizer on an ultra-wide lens, or even worse, on a panorama, just to make the blue sky darker. Please, why? I know why. Because they read in a book, or saw on YouTube, that the polarizer makes colors richer and helps to bring out cloud structure. But nobody told them what actually happens. The effect of a polarizer is strongest at roughly 90 degrees to the sun. It means if the sun is to your left, the sky straight ahead will go dark. But toward the sun and directly opposite the sun, the effect disappears almost completely. So, on an ultra-wide shot or across a stitch panorama, you don't get a nice even effect. Instead, you get a patch of very dark sky fading into bright blue, then back into dark, then light again. It looks like an ugly dark blotch across your frame, a visual disaster. And here's the worst part. You can't just fix it quickly. Boosting colors or adding contrast in the clouds takes, I don't know, 5 seconds in editing. But correcting that uneven polarizer effect can take a very long time, and often you can't fix it at all. So when should you actually use a polarizer? Only where it makes sense. So, to cut reflections on water, on rocks, on leaves. In the multi-row panoramas, there's usually just the bottom row where you have water or reflective surfaces. In single shots, you can sometimes get away with shooting one frame with the polarizer, another without, and masking them together. But please, stop slapping a polarizer on your ultra-wide lens just to get a darker sky. It's not saturation, it's not drama, it's just a mess. Then comes an epidemic I keep hearing. I shoot at f16 or f22 or even higher because I want everything sharp. Wrong again. This is exactly how diffraction kills your images. Every lens has a sweet spot, the aperture where it performs best. And here is an old but still true rule of thumb. The sweet spot is usually about 2 stops down from the widest aperture your lens allows. So, if you have a fast f2.8 wide angle, the sweet spot is often around f5.6. The problem, at f5.6 you don't get much depth of field in complex scenes. That's why most landscape photographers compromise and work at f8 or f11, still very close to peak sharpness, but also with enough depth of field. Once you go beyond that, things fall apart fast. From f13 onward, lens performance drops sharply and diffraction takes over. By the time you hit f16 or f22, you are bending light so much at the aperture edges that sharpness collapses. Don't believe me? Shoot the same scene at f8 and f22, zoom to 100% and compare. At f22, the center looks like mush. And here's the kicker with sun stars. A good quality lens will already give you clean rays starting around f4 or f5.6. Personally, I think f16 looks harsh and unnatural. That's my taste. For me, it ruins the atmosphere of the image. But photography is subjective. If you really want that dramatic starburst effect, fine, take one frame at f16 just for the sun, then blend it with your sharp f11 frame. That way, you get the effect without destroying the whole shot. Another one. I like darker photos, so I underexpose and fix it later. This one gives me nightmares. Pulling shadows in post destroys your file. If you want a moody dark look, the solution is different. Expose all the way to the edge of clipping, but don't actually clip the highlights, and then darken in post. That way you keep all the detail, especially in fog, twilight, or low contrast scenes. Underexposing is a disaster. You are throwing data away. Expose right up to the limit, then bring it down. Your photo will thank you. Panoramas come with their own set of myths. I often hear, I only shoot pano if I need a huge print. Wrong. Printing big is nice, but the real reason for panoramas is creative freedom. With a pano, you can use a long lens, stitch multiple rows, and create perspectives you could never get from a single wide shot. You can build square formats without cutting your pixels to pieces. You can even make the frame as wide as you want, 180 degrees, 360 degrees, whatever suits the scene, and suddenly a location that has been photographed a million times can look completely fresh. So it's about composition, not just resolution. And another one, you can't shoot panoramas with water or moving clouds. That's nonsense. I stitched panels of waterfalls, rivers, crashing waves, even stormy skies. If you overlap carefully and stitch smart, it works perfectly. Look at my portfolio. Multi-row panels with plenty of motion and no issues. And finally, one of the most dangerous lies being spread by YouTubers. You don't need a tripod, stabilization is enough. No, tripods are the foundation of serious landscape photography. Without a tripod, you can't do long exposures, you can't bracket consistently, and you can't avoid parallax errors in panoramas. Stabilization is nice for snapshots, but it won't save your night shots, your waterfall, or your precise compositions. If someone tells you otherwise, they are either lazy or selling shortcuts that don't exist. So there you have it, some of the biggest sins in landscape photography. Maybe some of them sound familiar, maybe you've been guilty of one or two. That's fine. The important thing is to recognize these myths for what they are and stop letting them ruin your images. And before we wrap up, just a quick reminder. If you want to dig deeper, Patreon is live. That's where we post extra behind the scenes, detailed workflows, and insights we can't share on YouTube. And of course, if you want to practice these techniques in the field, join one of our photo expeditions. Iceland, Lofoten, Dolomites, Madeira, Cyprus or Alaska. These trips are designed to put this knowledge into practice in some of the most incredible landscapes on the planet. So thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, and as always, keep chasing the light.
By the way, have you heard that you can join us on our exclusive photography expeditions to Lofoten and Iceland? If you want to know more, check the link below.